Hey y'all, I'm Hope, and today I'm going to be reading some books about clones. This is the next section of my Goodreads Choice project where I'm reading all of last year's sci-fi and fantasy nominees, and in today's episode I'm going to be reading what are actually I think both clone thrillers. So first up I'll be reading The Echo Wife, which is about a woman who is a geneticist and her husband has an affair with a clone of her, but then the clone kills the husband and so they have to work together to hide the body. So that sounds really interesting, and I'm curious to see what I end up thinking of that one. And my hold actually just came in on that one, so I'll be reading that shortly. And then the other book I'll be reading for this video is Constance by Matthew something. I'll put it on the screen. I can't think of it. Fitzsimmons, I think. Anyway, Constance is about a woman who is gifted a clone by her aunt, and the idea being that when you die, your memories are uploaded into the clones. There's like periodic backups of your memories put into the clone, and then when you die, your consciousness can be transferred to the clone. You keep on living. So this woman is gifted a clone by her aunt, and then sometime later, she wakes up in the clone's body 18 months out of date and realizes that she has been murdered, and she needs to follow her own footsteps to figure out who killed her and why. So that sounds really fun as well, and I'm really curious to see what I think of these two books. They both sound like a lot of fun, and I think this is going to be a really fun episode of this project. So I'll check in with you guys when I've actually read some of the books. So I finished The Echo Wife 2 or 3 days ago, and I'm feeling really torn on this one. I think I gave it 3 to 3.5 stars. I really wanted to like this book, and I just didn't like it as much as I thought I was going to. I think part of the problem is this book I've seen referred to as a thriller quite a bit. I think it's listed or like shelved on Goodreads quite a bit as like a sci-fi thriller, and I really don't think it's a thriller. I think it's more of a sci-fi horror, because this book's got it's got a lot of big ideas, but kind of the main two that it tries to tackle are like, are clones people and cycles of abuse. So those are kind of the two big ideas that it's playing with. It's also got stuff about identity and personhood and motherhood and like the things we do to avoid being our parents, being like our parents. It's got a lot of ideas around that, and I think it's really interesting, but I think it bites off more than it can chew. So part of the problem I had with this is that the main character of Evelyn is kind of terrible. She's kind of a terrible person. She's very self-centered. She's willing to ignore other people's emotional needs to serve her own ambitions. She cares more about her research than she cares about literally anything else. And like, yes, it's good to be passionate, but she's literally putting like the needs of the people around her on hold so that she can work on her research. And so as a result, I think that the book relies a lot on your believing some of the later revelations in it to really pay off the like, are clones people and cycles of abuse storylines. But because of the way it's set up, because Evelyn is such a strong, mean character, I was taking all of her like evaluations of the people around her with a grain of salt. So then I didn't really believe the revelations we have later about some of the other characters. So I think that this book would have benefited from having the other woman, Martine, who is a clone of Evelyn. I think it would have benefited from having her perspective, because she has a very different personality. And I think that some of the other revelations might have made more sense if we'd had a more balanced view or had like multiple viewpoints on the character that those revelations are about. I think that would have helped balance the narrative a lot better, and I wouldn't have been so like, but are you sure about all of the revelations in the later part of the story. I think also that the cycles of abuse storyline kind of gets paid off a lot better. A lot of this book is about Evelyn and her family history and how that made her the person that she is today. And as a result, because of that focus and without Martine's perspective, it makes the like, are clones people piece feel very like surface level, because Evelyn, in many instances in the book, for most of the book, appears to be the only person who doesn't think that they are. We have other characters who verbally say clones are people. We have a clone who is like talking about her wants and needs and like her desire to overcome her programming. So I think Evelyn's like the only person that really seems to not think that clones are people, so it kind of like undermines its own kind of question that it's asking. The other thing that I had an issue with was because of Evelyn's kind of single-minded focus on her research, the stakes didn't feel very real, because the research is really only going to matter to Evelyn, and so because she's so focused on that, we're not considering any of the like legal ramifications of anything that's happening, or the social ramifications, because with the setup of this book being that the clone has murdered the husband and Evelyn and the clone are working together, so Martine has murdered Evelyn's husband and who she was having an affair with, and she and Evelyn are covering up the murder. Because that's like the setup for it, you'd think there'd be a lot of discussion of like, what are the legal ramifications of a murder committed by somebody who doesn't legally exist, and what does this mean for Evelyn as an accomplice, and things like that. But the book literally never touches on that at all. I don't think there's even a point when they get like concerned about being found by the police. They're just covering up this murder. It goes way too smoothly, and Evelyn is just like, well, if people find out, there's going to be problems for my research. And so I think that without having at least some suggestion that there are these other ramifications that she's ignoring, it just didn't really feel like the stakes mattered at all. So I think my kind of final evaluation of the book is that the writing is really good. I really like Sarah Gailey's writing, and I would try something else from them. I would love to try another one of their books. I think they have something new coming out that I might pick up. But I think that the execution here was shaky because it was just trying to do too many different things. However, I did really like the ending. I think the ending is really unsettling in a really interesting way. So I thought that was kind of a nice like way to end the book, and I enjoyed that. It definitely had me thinking for a while afterwards. So although I didn't think it was super well done, I did think that a lot of the ideas it brought up were interesting, and I think it's worth picking up if the premise sounds interesting to you. I do think, though, you should go in with the expectation that it's more kind of on the horror side and kind of philosophical more than it's a thriller. So I finished Constance today, and I really enjoyed this one. This was a very fun book. This one is, I think, more correctly marketed as a clone thriller than The Echo Wife was. It is much more a thriller story. But this book follows Constance Darcy, also known as Con, who's this young woman who was in a band, and then they were in a terrible accident on the way to a gig, and she and one other member survived. The 2 members died, and a 3rd member was severely injured and is now in a coma. And so it's 3 years after the accident, and it's about her kind of dealing with the grief that she still has over that accident. And then as she's kind of muddling through her life, something happens and she wakes up as a clone. And her clone is 18 months out of date. She's missing 1.5 years of her memory. And so she has to retrace her own footsteps to solve her own death and figure out how she ended up becoming a clone, how her clone was activated, and, you know, how she ended up in the situation that she's in now. And, like, along that storyline, there's lots of really interesting characters. I really liked a lot of the side characters, and I thought it was really cool that there were some major factions, and she was engaging with a lot of the leaders of these major factions, and they had really interesting motivations, because they all had competing motivations, but they were more nuanced than, like, this is the good guy or this is the bad guy. There was, like, no clear sense of right or wrong in the story, and it was a lot about Con having to sift through everything she was being told to figure out what was true and what was not, and then also trying to deal with that situation while also sorting through her own feelings about being a clone and whether she thinks that she is a person. So similarly to The Echo Wife, this book kind of tackles the idea of, like, are clones people? But I think that this book did it a lot more successfully because it's from Con's perspective, who is a clone. And so there was a lot about, like, are clones people? But beyond that, if clones are people, are they the same people as the person that they are a clone of? Is Con the clone the same person as Con Darcy, the original? So that was kind of one of the conversations that was going on. And I thought that that was really interesting. I really liked the way that the plot on this one kind of unraveled, and I thought that the pacing was really good. The beginning is slow, but once you actually get into it and get to the kind of mystery elements of it, it's really fun, and I really enjoyed it. And again, love the characters. There were also some support characters, a part of Con's life, that were really wonderful, and there are some characters that show up in the latter half of the book that I love with my whole heart. They're lovely. So yeah, there was a lot of really good stuff happening here, and I really liked the questions that this book was tackling, and I think it just did them a lot more successfully because, especially with this idea of, like, are clones people, there were more clearly a range of opinions on that topic and a lot of different answers provided. So there's not, like, a clear, like, yes or no answer. but we get a lot of different perspectives on the idea, and there was no like clear cut good guy, bad guy, etc. So I thought this was really fun, and I'm really glad I picked this one up. So I was a little nervous when I put this down and was like, I'm not enjoying the beginning of this. Is this just going to be a video of books that are kind of not my thing? But it actually turns out the second one was really good. So I'm really glad that I picked these up, and I do want to read more from Sarah Gailey, even though I didn't love The Echo Wife, and I'm also very excited that there's going to be a sequel to Constance coming out later this year. I think it's called Chance, and it comes out in December. But yeah, this was a really fun experiment. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Probably was a relatively short one since there were only 2 books, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was long. I don't know yet. I'll find out when I'm editing. But thanks again so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.